Hi and welcome to another YouTube video. I am super excited about this one because this one is a collab, so it's something super special and it was so much fun to work on. And it is a collab with the fantastic Plumbaleenas. She was so sweet and so much fun to work with. She is an amazing creator. I'm going to link her YouTube channel in the description, and also in the process I got to draw her channel logo, which was super fun. Yeah, so what we did was we wanted to do a collab, but we didn't really know how to split it up, and I at the time wasn't really feeling like building a normal house. I was more inspired to build a landscape because I had seen some images, like some wallpapers of beautiful fantasy mushroom forests, and I wanted to recreate something like that in The Sims, and she was totally down for it. So I would make a landscape and also a shell for her, and she would then take this shell and decorate it and also decorate the inside. So she does the exterior, the interior, and completes this into like a whole build. And I have already seen what she did, and I can tell you it looks amazing. I am a huge fan of what she did, so definitely go and check out her video too. But before I talk about anything else now, I quickly want to explain what I'm doing now, because I'm building a bridge and I thought that would be a great opportunity to show you how you can build a bridge. So the first thing I did was I chose a spot for the bridge and I deleted the pool underneath, and then I have built a room above it that I could put one of these pieces that you can use for porches on top of. Then I was able to delete the room and freely decide on which height this I'll call it porch, was supposed to be. And then you just need to put stairs on both sides and you basically already have a functional bridge. But I of course also wanted to decorate it a bit, and you can go use this technique to create a bridge of any kind of style. You can go with like a wooden or Asian bridge, or you could go with a stone bridge, which I ended up with in the end. And I also decorated it with these black fences and also some stone pillars, which I thought looked really nice with this bridge. And now you can see me do the terrain, and I usually, or at least often, do the terrain in the beginning so that I have an image of how the landscape is looking in the end, and I can kind of work around that with areas where I can build and stuff. But in this case I knew that I wanted the front area to be like the same level as the ground level, and I also wanted this little river to be ground level. So in this case I did the river portion first, and then I got to the landscaping. And if you want landscaping that isn't as extreme as landscaping oftentimes tends to be, and you want a more like soft hill landscape, then it's very important that while you manipulate the terrain that you choose the softest brush that you can. Like when you choose the terrain tools, you have a slider down there that that decides the hardness of the brush that you use, and you set it to the softest, and also the intensity of the effect you set to the lowest, and then you can work very precisely with terrain, which is super cool. And what I really like to do is to take the tool that flattens the entire terrain to one height. So I do that on multiple steps, I create different steps of landscape, and then I go in and blend it all out, so to make it not as steppy, but to just have soft hills that also have a flat surface to work on. And I think that's a pretty nice way to go about it, even though of course there everyone can decide their own personal way to work with landscapes, because there are so many different types of landscapes and so many different ways this can look good. I just lately received some questions about landscaping and if I have some tips on that, so I thought this is a nice showcase and a nice opportunity to just explain some things. So maybe this time I finally will talk more about the build itself and give some tips about landscaping in this video, and not talk that much about random stuff. So the next two things that I want to talk about already happened in the footage that you've watched. So I'm going to put some like photos of the stuff that I'm talking about in one of the corners, and so you don't have to skip through the video or remember. And yeah, so the first thing is that at the beginning of the speed build, you maybe have seen that I didn't start with like a completely blank space, like not a completely blank lot. I actually had some random items in one corner, and that is because before I started the build I had my inspiration pictures and I went through the catalog of items that we have in The Sims. I went through the debug and the normal catalogs, and I picked out every item that I thought like fit in well with the theme, and they kind of inspired me in some way. So I put all of these items in one corner, and so I had this nice collection of items that really fit the theme, and that helped me immensely. First of all, I could just grab these items and I didn't have to cut out so much footage of me just scrolling through the catalog from the footage of the speed build in the end, which is like kind of a nice tip if you're a creator. Just like pick out some items beforehand so that you don't have that much aimless searching to cut out. But also if you are just someone that isn't a creator and that just likes to build but maybe doesn't have that much time to spend on a build or playing in general, it's also a nice tip because you just spend less time searching for items, because even if you don't really want that specific item that is there in the corner, you still know which packs, for example, work very well with what you're trying to do. So if you remember, I had so many items from, for example, Realm of Magic there, or in this case I was really surprised that I had a lot of items from Get to Work in this collection, because I totally forgot that Sixum existed, to be honest. And so when I was doing the collection, I was like, oh yes, all these Get to Work items work very well for what I want to do. So I could just filter for Realm of Magic and Get to Work, and I could find almost everything that I needed, even though it is not in the corner anymore. So that was very helpful and really sped up the process, which was really nice because I had a very stressful last week. So definitely remember that tip if you ever need to build something and you have time restrictions. And the next thing that I quickly want to explain, and with quickly I really mean quickly, otherwise there's so much other stuff happening that I actually wanted to talk about and to explain. So what I quickly want to do is explain to you how I made the little waterfall that I made, because I think a lot of people maybe want to have waterfalls in their builds but don't know how to. So the way that I did it is I used Island Living. I don't know if there's a waterfall in another pack, but if you have Island Living, you can definitely make a waterfall. And you go to debug and sort by Island Living, and then you see an item that doesn't really look like waterfall. It's just basically a light blue blob. And then you pick out this light blue blob and place it down, and then you see this shape, but it's just really like the water texture, so you need to fit it out with all of the different stones around it. In this case, I was kind of happy with how the stones look and how it follows the shape of the water. It was just that the top bit was a little bit spiky for my liking in the beginning, so I kind of rounded it out with some bigger and rounder stones. Then the next thing I did was to create the shell, and with the shell the only thing I really had to consider was to start the room from the highest point of the terrain, so the highest corner of the terrain, so that the room doesn't flatten the terrain, but rather you start from the highest point and then the foundation like builds itself fitting to the terrain. So that's like a nice tool if you work with different heights of terrain and you want to build a house on it. And now we get to talk about one of my favorite steps in the landscaping, which is terrain paint. And terrain paint is so useful. So what I did first, and what I also would advise, is to start with the walkways. The walkways, especially in this case, with such a big lot and big landscape, kind of help to divide it and also to tell you where to put like more interesting things, because then it would make sense that people would frequently walk along these ways. And also it kind of separates the build into different areas, which was like super helpful with this one. And when I go about walkways, I always start with a layer of very dark dirt, basically. So I do I outline where I want the walkways to be with this dark dirt, and then on top of this layer of dark dirt, I go in with the texture that I actually want for the walkway. But because there is the dark dirt underneath, it kind of frames the new walkway in a very nice way. Also, for the terrain paint, there goes, at least for me, the same as goes for the terrain like height manipulation, because I always like to work with very soft brushes and also with smaller brushes, because it just gives you a higher level of accuracy when working with the terrain paint. Of course, there are also areas where you, for example, want to build a little sand pit that needs to be perfectly like perfect shape with not a lot of like outfall on the edges. So you of course go for not a very soft brush but a very hard brush. But in general I like to go with a soft brush, and with that you also get this nice like flow of the colors. It's not these hard edges, and especially for the walkways you can still see the dark brown kind of framing the walkway, and I think that is a super nice effect. And when you're working with a landscape like this that is more like a soft hill landscape, terrain paint is definitely your friend, because you can use it as a shader and highlighter. So you can go in and you take the most top bits of the different hills and paint on top of that with the like lightest color of grass that you can find in the menu, and then you go onto the areas between those like hilltops, and you choose the darkest color of grass that you can find, and you kind of paint around them and can really give this 3D and shaded look. But that's enough about the terrain painting. Now we get to the actual process of placing the trees and plants and stones, which is, I think, what most people think about when they think of landscaping, myself included, basically. And so in this case, that was very, very interesting, because in this build, I worked with 3 different kinds of landscapes and areas. There are these areas that are basically like a normal forest. You have these green or evergreen trees, and then down below you have some grass or some leaves, and also some normal forest fern. So that's like the first area, and I tried not to use these different items that I wanted to use randomly, but I wanted to keep them in different areas. So I used these big evergreen trees, and then on the like foot of this tree I tried to surround it with normal green forest stuff. And then there was the second kind of area, which was dominated by these these pink mushroom trees, and also these like red little alien trees. And then on the foot of those I chose to place the red leaves and just some like red planty stuff. And I tried to keep it also within this area surrounding these mushrooms, these pink mushrooms, to kind of keep the like theme intact and to make it make sense. Because if I would have mixed all of these different landscaping items together more randomly, I don't think it would have looked that good. And then the main area of this forest tree is covered with these big blue mushrooms. And when I saw them, I was like, yes, I can execute my vision with this build, because these blue mushrooms, they were so beautiful, and also they glow in the dark, which is so cool. And so I just blew them up to be like a super huge size, and then from get to work there were so many great blue items that look like kind of veins going through the ground, and some alien looking plants, but also some more normal looking plants, but they are just blue all of a sudden. And so I was able to surround the foot of these mushrooms with these blue plants, and I really liked the look of that. So I would say if you're landscaping and you're working with kind of different areas, it doesn't need to be a fantasy theme. It can also be like one half of the build is more of an evergreen forest and the other half is more like a normal tree forest. It's not called normal tree. Evergreen trees are also normal trees, but I just don't know the name for it in English, so I'm just going to call it like a not evergreen forest. And yeah, they also have different plants on the bottom of these forests, so I would also do some research and then choose the plants that would make sense in these different settings. And if you do it like that, so if you think a little bit more about the placement of your plants, you can really get some nice effects and it just looks more right. But one thing that is a pain when you're working with different terrain heights is that sometimes there are just areas where you can't smooth out the terrain enough and you get these not so nice looking brown edges. And there are two ways that I know of to go about this and to cover them up. One thing that you see me do here at the moment, or that I just finished, is cover it up with different stones. And I really like to do that. I think it's a nice reminder to not only put plants into your landscapes but also stones, and it a lot of the time looks very great, and it also makes sense for kind of like a steeper way up. It just looks kind of natural, so I really like to cover them up with stones. But another thing that you can do, that you'll also see me do later when I cover up the brown area beneath the well, is what you can also do is just spam flowers. So you put a lot of flowers so that you basically can't see the ground anymore. And if you kind of stagger them on top of each other very closely, you also can't see that there is this brown underneath, and it can also look very good if you work in a space where stones wouldn't look right. And on the topic of the well, I think that's a great point in time to talk about the three different main attractions of the landscape, because I made these walkways and there were three different points where they just ended, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to put in some interesting stuff where they end, where people would go to. And then I got to that point, and with some of them I didn't know what to do, but in the end I really like the three options that I came up with. The first one is the portal in the debug items from Realm of Magic, and this portal is super cool and it would make total sense in kind of a fantasy or magical build to have a portal to the magic realm. And so I put this onto the little half island that was built by this river that flows around it, and I really like it there. And the second thing that I did is I found this nice basically crack in the earth where this blue glow is coming from, and I thought that would fit very well with the glowing blue mushrooms. So I used this as a kind of a crack of energy and magical powers maybe, so I kind of put it there and I made it glow even more with these nice glowing things from Realm of Magic and blue, and they really fit in super well together. And this area is surrounded with the most of these blue alien looking flowers, more than on the other parts of this build. And then the third area that I came up with is a more well kept looking area where there is a magical well on top. So I also put some of these glowing balls into the well so that it looks like this water that is coming down there is glowing and magical water. And I really like how this one came out, this well especially, because this was an idea that I didn't originally have, and I just came up with it on the spot. And I think of the 3 areas, this turned out to be my favorite. I just can imagine like super romantic moments between your Sims there. So yeah, I really like this area, and so I kind of got a little bit more interest into the landscape, I think. And then as a final step, I just put in some well-kept flowers around the walkway, and also I filled up the ground with flowers. When it comes to filling up the ground, it really depends on the build that you are building. There are some builds where that just looks like you went overboard with the landscaping and it doesn't look fitting and it doesn't look good. For example, for a normal suburban build, this like wouldn't fit at all, but I think that in this case with this magical forest, it was very fitting to just fill up the ground with some plants and then later on add a little bit of variation. And yeah, I really like the way that it turned out, and I especially like the way that it turned out when you also put the finished build into it. So yeah, I am excited about how this collab came out. I hope you like it too. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked and enjoyed this video. If you would consider subscribing, you would make me super duper happy. I hope we'll see each other again.